6 different winners, 3 rallying experts, 1 new world champion. The 2024 World Rally Championship season certainly delivered, and we are here to talk all about it. Joining me, Luke Barry, is David Evans. Hello, David.
You said 3 rallying experts?
Yeah.
Who's not the expert?
Me.
Me.
No, me. Not 0 rallying experts, potentially. But David, that's a very nice way to introduce yourself to this special podcast video.
Looking forward to it, Lukey.
Alistair, how are you?
Slightly worse after the inflection you put on experts, like it was doubtful.
And Colin Clark, how are you, sir?
As always, absolutely lovely to be in your company.
The intention here is essentially just to review the year, talk about our highlights, but I'm sure these boys will give us a very good debate as always. But we want to start off actually just by reflecting on where we stood at the start of 2024, because I think we've all got so used to the idea that we had no Rovanperä for a full year, but that was the big thing ahead of Monte Carlo. The world champion wasn't there, which I haven't done the research to work out when the last time that was, but it's a long time since we had that situation. Everybody suddenly had a massive opportunity in front of them, David.
Oh, it was huge. And I remember Elliot and I went up to see Elvin. We did a long interview with Elvin, and we talked about it in the car on the way up, that this is Elvin's big opportunity. You know, and I think every driver, certainly Thierry, Tanak less so, because Tanak they've all got so much self-confidence. You know, Tanak knows that he can beat everybody, he's better than everybody. But I think Elvin and Thierry in particular saw this as this moment, this opportunity, and we talked a lot with Elvin about it. And it was, you're quite right, at the top of the season, it was the talking point, because we'd not long found out that he wasn't actually going to be there. And, you know, there was that sort of stunned silence when we read the news, or when we heard the news for the first time, that, crikey, he's a world champion, and he's not actually going to do a full season title defence.
Well, there was a bizarre situation where he was in Casino Square for the Monte Carlo rally, promoting his own road car, but not actually competing in the rally, which was strange.
Yeah, no, it was a strange start. It was a bizarre start, but it was actually quite exciting, quite entertaining, because something new was going to happen, wasn't it?
I think that was the main thing, wasn't it? The fact that, you know, we'd got so used to years of domination, and then Rovanperä came along, and very quickly we realised he will dominate for as long as he wants to dominate. And it was like, oh. But then we have this opportunity. We have this season ahead of us where, I don't know what the odds were on the various drivers, but it was very difficult to say at the start of the season who was the favourite. I don't know. Looking back, it's still difficult to say who was the favourite at the start of the year. And that for me was the most exciting thing about Monte.
I think you look back and you think probably it was when Lowe decided to stop at the end of 12, was it? And then into 13 he did those couple of events or what have you. But there was that sense of adventure at the top of that season as well. Like, wow, it's the start of something new. And of course we'd already lost Ogier to a part programme as well. So it had a strange feeling to the start of the season.
Alistair, these two have mentioned, I guess, Evans as being a championship favourite. But for me personally, I think I looked at, if I'm trying to remember correctly, my thought process at the time, Ott Tanak was the only world champion doing a full season. We obviously had Thierry, had been second more times than he cares to remember. As many fingers he's got in one hand, he's had runner-up finishes. Can you remember what your feeling was at the start of the year, who you kind of thought would step up in Rovanperä's absence?
Well, it was very clear from the outset that Hyundai were designing their season around going for the Drivers' Championship. You know, they had objectively the strongest lineup for that specific championship. You know, Toyota with Elfyn, he'd come close a few times on his own. You know, we talk about Thierry and his 5 times short, but, you know, Elfyn was kind of in the same position. It happened a little less to him because he'd had less time in a top spec car. This was the question for me. Does Ott Tanak settle into his old new surroundings quickly enough that he stops those two getting a bit of a head start, and he can just sort of dominate the middle of the season that would be coming up with the gravel rounds and so on, where he would presumably be a bit more comfortable, a bit more at ease. Elfyn, I felt at the beginning of the season, this was his best chances. People have pointed out. Did I think he was going to do it or not? I thought, yeah, why not? You know, he's been through many things. There was 22 when he tried to do something different in his approach. You know, he'd lost 2 in a row to Ogier, so he decided, right, forget this consistency nonsense. I'm going for it. And then he crashed out a few times at the
So
start
what's
of
the
that
answer
season.
then? Was it Elvin or was it Ollie?
Yeah, I'm going around the circles here, am I? What, as in the outright favourite?
Yeah, when you went into Monte?
I saw all three equal because they all had different positives and
I didn't
negatives.
see all three equal. I thought Tanak was the outsider. You know,
He had to be a bit,
He had to
didn't
be.
he?
He was coming from a difficult year. He was coming to a new team. There were still question marks over Tanak. For me, it had to be Neuville, because Neuville was obviously well and truly in Hyundai. The car was built around him. It was a difficult car. It's still a difficult car by all accounts. But Neuville was the man with Elvin that I assumed it would be one of those two. Tanak was always one that I think a lot of people thought would be great. It'd be great to see him coming back because he had such a... And I thought that at the start of the year. At the end of the year, I wasn't so sure that Neuville didn't actually deserve it. Neuville did deserve his title, and Tanak less so. But at the start of the year, for me, it was either Neuville or Evans.
But is that not a little bit ridiculous, Cole? Because I can see you're thinking, but Tanak was the only world champion. He was the only one who knew how to win a title. And we'd seen him go from car to car.
But if you brought Loeb back, David, he'd have been one of two world champions. Would you have said that Loeb would, because he's a world champion and a 9 times world champion?
No, because he's been out. He doesn't have the same sort of seat time or the match practice at WRC that Tanak does.
No, I'll stand by that with Tanak because he's had a rocky relationship with Hyundai in his first stint with them. He was going to a car that we knew was very much suited to Neuville, a team that still, although they've come together an awful lot more than at the start of, what year was it, 2022, and the car was absolutely awful. The team were fractured. There were massive divisions within that team. The team had come together. But, Tanak going back, there were still questions. There were still questions for me as to whether Tanak could get to grips with the car and the team. And whether Tanak, because he has got an interesting approach these days. And I think there were questions over that as well.
Whether he could bring, because, the way he walked out on the team at the end of 2022 to go to M Sport, it did leave a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths that, he'd got a year left on his contract, but off he went, off back to M Sport. And it was interesting to know how he could bring those people around. And, the team, people like Christian Loriot, and I'm sure that, they would have been tremendously disappointed when he walked out, but he came back and I think he probably found the car harder to drive than he expected. But clearly,
when he got to grips with it, my goodness, he was as quick as anyone, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Had he had the rubber of the green this year, and he didn't, he made a couple of mistakes, but he also had
that deer.
The deer. The deer
10
is the big
seconds
one.
earlier.
Yeah, I think we were all waiting for someone to step up and take charge of this almost slightly new era of the World Rally Championship, with Rovanperä out for just the season only, but still to make appearances later in the year. Did we really expect, though, Colin, Neuville to make such a statement so early on? All of these sort of discussions about Sunday points and everything else, he goes and wins the rally and claims all 30 points on the first round. It was a huge statement for me.
A huge statement. A surprise? Not really. He'd shown his quality in Monte Carlo before, hadn't he? And we knew that car could go well in Monte Carlo. He made a mistake a few years ago when he was leading the rally. He won the rally just a handful of years ago as well. So it wasn't a huge surprise, but you're right, it was an absolute statement of intent, and it probably wasn't the biggest statement of intent in the year. I think that came in Sardinia, and he took 12 points from Sardinia, wasn't it?
Yeah.
For me, that was the biggest statement. It was like, okay, even when I have a bad weekend, you are still going to have to do something really special to stop or to get ahead of me, and no one did after Monte. So no, it wasn't. Your question was it a surprise? Not a surprise that he was that quick and he was that good, because we've seen it before from him.
But you remember that Monte, though, when we were still kind of coming to terms with the points and what have you.
and we were still coming to terms with points at the last rally of the season.
We very much were. But there was that point where the Saturday evening arrived and we were like, okay, so that's Thierry's got the 18. Well, he hasn't, but he has. And then don't forget a Sunday, and that's 5. Well, no, that's 7 plus 5. So, and then suddenly he got 30 points. The perfect Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Thursday night in Monte. It was incredible. And that, like you say, it was an incredible statement of intent. And that he beat Ogier.
The fact he beat Ogier was maybe the biggest surprise.
Yeah. And
I can't remember, did Seb have any problems on that?
Ogier was a family bereavement in the lead up to the event, wasn't it? Which I think
did,
which probably played into the psyche a little bit. But it was, I agree, I think for me, the win, as you said, Colin, not the massive surprise. It's just the fact that he managed to get all 30 that early on. It felt like he was delivering a real message to everybody else that he was up against. Sweden, Thierry, I think he was 4th, not on the podium. It was...
There was another message in Sweden, wasn't there?
There was another message.
That whole bonnet sportsman.
I think it was Friday afternoon. Elvin Evans was...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we saw him.
Yeah.
Yes. When all this, oh, my goodness, I've got a problem. I don't have a problem. Yes. That was interesting.
Yes, this put Evans first on the road for some of the stages on Friday. Neuville, as championship leader, was meant to be first. There was some suggestions that Thierry was maybe playing a bit of gamesmanship. But all again, it's psychological battles, isn't it, David? We see that so early on. Thierry's never been afraid to get stuck in with this stuff.
No, and rightly so. I think we had this debate in Japan about rights and wrongs of team orders. Play the game. If you can, just do what you can to get away with it. You know, it's
not even to get away with it. That's suggesting they're doing something that's illegal. You're not
just
getting away with it.
Push the barrier, and push
Absolutely.
the boundaries, whatever. Just you've got to use absolutely everything that you've got.
Absolutely.
And you know, if that's what he did, if it was gamesmanship, then good on him, because it's not against the law, it's not against rules, it's against the spirit of the regulations. Then change the regulations. You know, and don't blame Thierry for doing what he can. You know, ultimately, he's world champion.
Here's a question for you, though. Why go to all of the effort of the acting and so on? Why not just say, no, I'm not going to go into time control yet?
Outrightly unsportsmanlike behaviour, do you?
Why not? It makes no difference.
Well,
I guess for the brand, you're going to dress it up a wee bit.
There's a very big difference. You have to prove that he didn't have an electrical problem. And that's very different. If he turns up and says, "Off you go, I've got no issues, but I'm not going in," you might well get sanctioned for that.
I can see your
point.
point.
Why would you though? What rule is that breaking?
Sportsmanship.
And potentially bringing a sport into disrepute. I don't know. Potentially. There's a bunch of things that he could fall foul of.
But again, you know, we talk about maybe indicators early on in the season. That was an indicator, wasn't it? The fact that he was willing wherever possible, and we know, you know, that the penalty for winning Monty is more often than not a very difficult Sweden. He knew that before he arrived in Sweden. He knew it was going to be tough, so he knew he might have to, you know, play the game a little bit. He might have to get stuck in a little bit, you know, to maximise his points, and that's what he did.
And he'd spent 2 years with the great Andrea Adamo, you know, the absolute master of how to work, and Alain Panas. Between those two, you know, when there was some jiggery-pokery to be done, Lord alone knew what was coming.
They are the king of the jiggery-pokery.
Totally.
You know?
And Thierry would have understood that. And, you know, when you spend 2 years thinking, I've got this, I know, we're going to do what? Oh, crikey, I'd never even thought of that. Then it makes you second-guess everything that you can possibly do.
I think if we talk about indicators, though, the other one for me was Oyt Tanak, who'd had a difficult Monte Carlo, I guess, adjusting back to the I-20, but he'd had a bit of an off, I think, the second or maybe the first morning. Sweden, he was right up there at the front. To be fair, the same thing happened to Kalle Rovanperä, which we can get onto, but he put it in a snowbank, Alistair, which is probably, of all drivers to have done that, Oyt was not someone at that point we expected to have this kind of incident.
I don't know if I'd even go that far. I mean, considering the amount of people it caught out during the course of the rally, I mean, like I said, Kalle went into one, Taka went into one the next morning. I can't say I'm entirely surprised. Like we were talking about at Monty, he was still getting used to the car again. I don't want to say I wasn't surprised, but it wasn't the most shocking thing. It was more the fact that two contenders went off, because they were on the same stage, I think.
Yeah.
Oyt and Kalle both going off. That was what really kind of set home that, this is going to be an interesting season.
But that's very different approaches to the rally. You know, Oyt Tanak has to be looking at it, as Neuville, it transpired, was looking at it rally by rally by rally, looking at the end of the season in the championship. That should have been Oyt's approach, and perhaps it wasn't. Kalle, it didn't matter. Kalle was, and he said it, he was there to win, and if he wasn't going to win, he was going to bin it. Which is what happened. How many did he win?
I think it's 4 wins and 3 retirements was this season.
You know, and easy to look back, but these things shouldn't happen. They shouldn't happen if you are looking to build a championship.
I guess as well, if you come off the back of a tricky Monty, you really want to settle yourself down in Sweden and just bag some points.
You've got to.
More middle of the road approach. But is that Tanak's approach? You know, he's very kind of gung-ho, isn't he? And, you know, particularly events, fast gravel, fast loose surfaces like Sweden, he would want to say, this is mine.
Yeah.
Certainly at this stage, I believe, I can't remember the exact gap, I could refer to notes, but Neuville and Evans were the top two in the championship. Evans became the first driver to outscore a rally winner in World Rally Championship history. Esteban Ocon won the event. Evans got the most points. That was certainly a fairly controversial media zone on Sunday in Sweden. Lots of opinions, I'm sure lots of you agreed with.
And he was pretty appalled himself, wasn't he?
He was embarrassed.
He was absolutely the most vocal against the point system. And he was almost embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
It was Lappy's day. Yeah. It was Lappy's rally. That was where he waited, 6 years or something, 7 years for that.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. And he didn't score the most points. And I think Elvin almost felt embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
It was a rather strange start, but nice to see Lappy get another win. It had been a long time coming, I think.
Oh, 100%. One of the nicest guys in the sport. And he'd earned it. He'd driven tremendously well. And from memory, he'd driven really well the year before in Sweden, hadn't he? When they had the puncture and stuff with him and Craig. I'm always happy to see an EP win.
It may have been the last one, sadly.
Yeah.
We still don't know. As we're building this, we still don't know.
True. That'd be a shame.
It would. I think a big shame. But Safari, Rally, Kenya and Kai Rovanperä returns again and back onto the top step. No retirement for him on this occasion. But I think this is one of the first signs that we saw in terms of the Manufacturers' Championship, just how ahead of the game Hyundai was over Toyota. It certainly seemed that they'd sussed out the new way to score maximum points on a Sunday over its rival. Specifically here, we're talking about Rovanperä didn't really go for it on the last day, just wanted to win the rally, which on an event like Kenya, you can understand.
I'm pretty certain he backed off to allow Evans in Kenya to take the extra points. He backed off, which is nuts.
I'll go with you on that.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure he did, because we talked to him about that, and he backed off. Whether or not that cost the manufacturer points, I think it may have done, because as you say, he took it nice and easy, and it was a and at that point we are asking the questions of the Toyota management. Like this all seems bizarre, that we understand what Callie's doing. It's all about wins, and we understand that maybe he's given extra points to Evans in the Drivers' Championship. That makes sense, but to lose manufacturer points makes absolutely no sense.
I would argue that actually he was doing the best strategy. Well, the team as a whole had been doing the best strategy possible, because look back at the season finale, which I'm sure we'll come to later. When you have 18 points banked, let the other two boys go off and go full send and let them take the risks on Sunday, because they're still eligible to bank those points. So really you should be going for a 1-2 for Evans and Taka on the Sunday. So, I think that element of it is fine for Calla to back off and bank the points. But
that was he set his stall out quite early that he wanted to win rallies this year. So, the points aspect for him was certainly a secondary consideration.
I'll tell you who was one of the first people to get really vocal about this was our wonderful cameraman producer, Elliot. I remember having an argument, he's laughing now, having an argument, and he was saying this is nonsense, it's absolute nonsense that Rovanperä's focus is purely wins, because the focus should be on wins, but also manufacturer points. And I'd have to say it took me a little while of listening to Elliot's arguments to go, geez, he might be right. He might be right. And he was right. He was right. And that, it took me a little while to understand that. And it took Toyota too long to understand that,
I think
arguably.
There's an element of this, but I'm not sure that we need to get kind of caught up in the whole Hyundai was quicker to learn the thing. I think it was almost circumstance that brought Hyundai into that, because they had a catastrophic Safari, didn't they? And then suddenly somebody in there would have been like, well, it's not all dead. It's not all over, don't forget. But, if they'd been in Rovanperä's position and leading the event, would they have taken those same steps on a Sunday?
Only a counter argument to that, why did Thierry score 30 in Monty?
Monty, yeah.
I know it's a different event, but I do get your point. But
I think good point, David.
It's a very good point. No, it is a good point. But I think, we've made a lot of the fact that Hyundai were quick. And, Latvala, Jari-Matti himself has said that Toyota was still focused on the traditional victory of winning a rally, which actually it lost all of its value, as we could see from what happened in Sweden. But I think it was definitely a circumstance a little bit with Hyundai that they were on the back foot, and it was a way to get back onto the front foot, which that was what it was there for. It was designed for that, and they were the quickest to take advantage of it. You would like.
I think, and when they saw the opportunity, they realised how valuable it was.
Yeah.
And maybe quicker than Toyota did. They saw that there was, there was opportunity there, and there was opportunity to be exploited, whereas
Yeah.
Toyota didn't. Toyota didn't. Right,
But they
right
saw
into
the opportunity, but they didn't prioritise it, did they?
Well,
Which is ridiculous.
yeah.
I mean, but equally, we're oversimplifying. Sitting in this beautiful surroundings at BGM Sport, it's easy to look back and say, well, you should have done that.
But that's our job. But our job
Yes.
is to do that, David.
Yeah.
No, but that is our job here.
Yeah,
and
no, it is.
that is our job, is to look and to work out where seasons actually turned around and started going well, and maybe where seasons didn't, and
Yeah.
reasons behind it. So, I'm not giving them that leeway. I know, I'm not giving it to them.
I think the best way I'd summarise it is, if you look at, obviously we know that Toyota won by 3 points in the end, but if you consider the sort of stage wins, rally wins, podiums, Hyundai should not have been that close to
No.
Toyota, and that to me suggests they were strategically ahead.
Yeah.
I think that's
All right, fair
that's
And,
my
and,
take. on
and,
it.
and the very basics, the car. The car was nothing like as good as the Toyota. So there are a number of elements there that suggested that they shouldn't have been that close. And there was a reason why they were that close. And it was either their brilliance strategically, or it was strategic naivety from Toyota. It's one of the two. And I'll argue it was a little bit of both. A little bit of both. And that's not sitting on the fence, but it was a little. I remember
It was,
having
no, absolutely
a conversation early in the year, and it might well have been in Kenya, with the Arimati saying, look, I get all this no team orders, but surely with the Sunday points and the situation on Sunday, and because remember, I think we came out of Safari, and it was remarkably tight in the drivers. There was like 5 drivers within a couple of points of each other. And I remember asking the Arimati on camera, surely you'll reconsider this now for Sunday points, in terms of strategy and tactics. And it was a very firm no. It took them a wee while to realise maybe that wasn't the right way.
But you don't know if it's some kind of corporate strategy that the drivers are left to drive their own...
Culture.
Yeah.
And culture as well, David. I totally agree
exactly.
with you. And Japanese culture perhaps dictates that you
leave
back your heroes, you back your main men.
Yeah.
So why would you slow them down?
I think the other big story at this point of the season, though, was not from a Toyota or a Hyundai driver, but Adrian Fourmeau at M Sport Ford as well, who, don't forget, had spent the year before back in WRC2 in a Rally 2 car, essentially kind of like M Sport's equivalent of the naughty step, a way to sort of rebuild his career, which worked. He came to Sweden, got a podium against the odds, came to Kenya, got another podium. Alistair, I think M Sport's always had this track record of doing this with drivers. Elvin Evans springs to mind, like Tanak in the past as well. It's another example of that working. How impressed were you with Fourmeau's newfound maturity, I think is the best word here?
Extremely, because there was absolutely no guarantee that strategy was actually going to work. It's not bulletproof. We've seen other drivers go through the same hullabaloo with Malcolm and going up and down, and it's not always worked out. But with Adrian, it was... I remember looking at the early season interviews and just thinking, it's not just like he's a different driver, it's almost like he's a different person.
That was the big
at this point. It's like an entire mindset shift had taken place in his head, and exactly the type he needed. It's almost like, because he'd given himself permission to slow his brain down a little bit and just give himself some breathing room. Do you know, actually, David, if he still does that thing where he puts breathe in his... Because obviously I noticed that in 22, and maybe he wasn't doing enough of the breathing, but it seems to be working now.
I'm sure he does. And yeah, I think you're right, you hit the nail on the head there, that he was a different character coming into this. And it was that process of rebuild, wasn't it, and reboot, and there was more humility there, and there was just... And that brought more pace.
Yeah, it was easy when it was all going wrong for Fourmeau. Because of his character, it was easy to criticise him in whatever year it was, 2022. And in some ways, easy not to like him, but he was totally different at the start of this year. He came across as being very humble, very engaging, actually quite good fun. He was a character that you wanted to talk to, you wanted to get to know. Now, I know that's nothing to do with his driving, but I think that was indicative of his different approach, his all-round different approach. It wasn't just a different approach to his rallying, it was a different approach to how he engaged. And I liked it, and I think there were elements that crept in towards the end of the year that were beginning to stretch that rebirth, if you like, and beginning to asking a few questions about the way it was all going towards the end of the year. But certainly the first half of the year, Fourmeau was just a breath of fresh air, in everything he did.
Here's a question though, Colin. Do you not think he sort of earned the right to be a little bit more pernickety with his questioning of the team towards the end, given he put in the hard work and got the podiums?
Not at all. I thought he was bang out of order. I think he was, David. I think he was. Chile, he was very vocal about parts that weren't, that were supposedly available, that would have given an extra 4 or 5 horsepower, but weren't put on the car because of financial constraints. Listen, he knew that. He knew that when he signed for M Sport, that finances were always going to be an issue. No, I just think there's an amount of respect that's due, and no matter how frustrated you are in certain situations, respect outweighs your frustrations. And it was one of those situations. He knew, certainly at CER, he knew he was moving. But I liked the new Formo so much that when I saw that sight him again, I thought, nah. Please don't go down that line. I've seen it before.
Well, that's the dangerous thing.
And I don't like it. And it, to me, it suggested the start. And I don't think this has happened because he's reined it back in again. But it suggested to me potentially the start of that slippery slope again, where a driver almost feels he can dictate to the team how the things go. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it because I liked him so much.
I think it was impatience.
It was impatience.
And I think that's what led to his downfall 2 years ago. And that was the worrying thing for me, is I agree, I've only done 2 events this year on the ground, but I noticed a big difference even between Greece and CER. Just in, I guess, in CER's event we're talking about with this difficulty with the setting of the car and everything, and he just looked, he was very keen to point out that it wasn't him.
It wasn't him.
And you understand
because
that.
He's right in the middle of negotiations telling Mr. Abitable he's the next best thing in rallying. You know, and anything that actually shows that he's not the next big thing in rallying, not greatest big thing in rallying, doesn't work for him, so he has to come up with excuses, and I think some of them were excuses.
Not just that, but I suspect he would have imagined that was his time to get the first win on the board. You know, remember he talked about the fact that I've won this event in Rally 2 last season. You know, okay, I wasn't registered for points, but I beat all the Skodas, all 40 of them, however many there were. This is going to be my rally, and it just turned out to be a bit.
We should remember where the mainstay of that reboot of good Formo came, though, was when it came to Dirtfish. Middle of the year.
That's true.
Drove the Ford Mustang, the Mackie, was it?
Mackie Rally.
Mackie Rally.
Yeah, and showed, I think actually, of course, everybody, all of the instructors at Dirtfish were brilliant, and they all helped Adrian reboot or whatever, but definitely Brenton and Nate, 2 of our senior instructors were fundamental.
Yeah, they're the reason.
Introducing him to American culture. They were very good at that.
Pool. Yeah. They certainly had a good night out. No, but it's true. I think I kind of see your point, Colin, that whenever you drive for M Sport in its current incarnation, you accept that it's not a full factory team, that there's, budget is an object, it's not, money's no object. But it is difficult because Formo's seen that he's pushing, he's progressing, and he's ready. He's done podiums 3 or 4 times, he's ready for the win. When you're not getting that nth degree of performance, you are going to be quite vocal about it. And clearly, as the year went by, his faith in his position, his strength in his own position, it grew, ad nauseum, didn't it? And it's now that he needs to be careful and just kind of keep all of that contained. He knows he's got the speed, he knows he's got the pace and the potential, but he's got to bring the people around him with him.
I'm sure we're going to come on to this, but for me, it's just he needs another reset because he's going into a situation. He's gone from team leader, where he can do and say what more or less at the end of the season he likes, into a situation where he's going to be told what he's got to do.
We think he's going into that situation. We're fairly sure he's going into that situation.
Croatia was up next on the WRC calendar. I think this one will be mainly remembered for that epic battle between Ogier, Neuville and Evans that eventually went the way of a surprised Ogier, because I think Evans and Neuville both made a mistake on the same stage. Evan had a spin, there was a slight miscommunication in the car for Thierry, so I think Thierry ended up beating Elvin in the end, didn't he? He was second, wasn't he? So this is still another opportunity, I guess, where Elvin could have taken something out of Thierry, but ended up didn't. Portugal was next. Again, not the most eventful event, apart from Rovanperä having another accident, which at this stage was, people were asking, has he lost his mojo? I guess to an extent he...
Yeah, they sort of forgot the Safari win.
Well, Yeah, but I think the problem is when you've got the reigning world champion who was winning from the front, when he's down the back of the order, everyone you almost couldn't win this year because everyone just expected him to win, and everything else wasn't good enough.
It was a slightly odd shunt as well, wasn't it? It wasn't one that you think, there's jeopardy there, it could happen. It was difficult to kind of explain that. But just to skip back to Croatia and Evans, I think at that point we were still seeing Elvin's, as much as he wanted to win rallies, in his preparation for the year, I think he thought consistency, bring points, just finish top three, keep doing that. And again, there's a failing there that he team didn't grasp, as we said, the Sunday aspect.
That was his problem all year, David, wasn't it? Was that he just did not have the confidence in the car to put it on the line. And it was only under very specific circumstances that we saw the best of Evans this year. And
that's fair, but I think it was still that championship, the way that he was trying to put his championship together.
It was the early doors, so absolutely.
But I think you're right. We've talked about it already that the car it wasn't the glove on the hand that it was with the 17 car. But it was odd, and the whole thing with Thierry, I think as well. That it was another indicator that when Thierry called Martin out about that issue with the pace note being quite called late or whatever it was Thierry saying, this is my year. Everybody around me has to be given 100%, which of course Martin always does, more than 100%. But there was a, I've spoken to a few people in the team, and there was definitely a step up from Thierry this year. That come on, boys, this is it, this is the chance, and I think we caught him in certainly the end of a stage. We've talked about this time and time again, that it's those really hot moments which can catch the drivers out, but also provide the absolute drama. You know better than anybody, Cole. That's where it happens.
Absolutely. No, and that's where you hear them at their most honest. Yeah. And at their most indiscreet. Yeah. And you'll catch the moment where they're having a go at the co-driver, where they're having hot words with the co-driver. You'll catch the moment where they're frustrated at the car, at themselves, at the strategy, whatever it might be. Stage ends are absolutely the place to get a proper measure on where a driver's at, in my view.
There was almost an element of team management coming into Neuville this year. I remember, first half of the year when the whole hullabaloo with the FIA WRC working group regulations coming in, and Thierry was vocal in a way I don't remember any other WRC driver ever being. It's almost like he wanted to take control of everything around him. He wanted to completely be on top of everything. He's not just thinking about his championship, he's thinking about, I want to make sure I'm also in the championship next year, so I could potentially defend the title that I win. And he's talking about, it's almost like he'd aligned his messaging with the needs of the team.
He's become the statesman. When we lost Ogier full time, we lost our statesman, our spokesman, and he's become that.
And that was obvious last year when he started talking about the promotion.
He was the one. He was the catalyst.
He was catalyst, 100%.
That was in Portugal.
And I think you're right. He is the elder statesman, within reason, the elder statesman, and he understands that position, and he understands how to use that position, and he used it for the sport's greater good last year. That was the stimulus for the working group, and he's clearly used it to the benefit of the team this year.
In a sporting sense, I think next round in Sardinia is when we really started to see just how strong Thierry's championship hand was. We referenced it earlier in the show, but he had that off on Saturday, and I think most Neuville seasons in the past have always kind of been defined by some form of capitulation, some kind of error. But this time, and I think largely because he had that get out of jail free card with the Sunday points, he was able to bounce back, claim all 12, and actually 12 points for a weekend, it's not what you aim for, but it's hardly disastrous considering the Saturday he spent his day halfway.
12 points was fourth place. Last year, 12 points was fourth place for a guy who spent most of Saturday at the side of the road. That's just huge.
I think psychologically as well for him to know that I was down there on Saturday, but here I am. Like you say, I've pulled a fourth place completely out of the fire. And that was, for me, we'd seen Thierry building his championship, but that Sardinia was the point that he just thought, I'm not going to be beaten this year. I am going to find a way to win this championship. Come hell or high water, I will be there. We will bring this team through, we will bring this car through. And Safario was massive as well, wasn't it? You look back to the issues that he battled with, pulling those goggles on and all of that stuff, and he just stuck at it. And Sardinia was, again, it was a demonstration of just how he did that.
You saw a bit of karma sort of repaying itself over the years in the finish of the rallies of, and Rogier won an event by 0.2 of a second in Jordan. He lost the event by then the same margin. Tanak's Sardinia curse repaid itself by a fairly dramatic win, a puncture for Ogier on the power stage, gave Tanak the rally win, which did mean a lot to him. If anyone's seen the celebration, it was a big deal for Hyundai, which again is interesting because we've talked about rally wins and how they don't matter, but I guess drivers are wired up in the same way. They know they've won any kind of competition. They're happy about it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Tanak on that event was just maybe even at the end of the previous stage, he said, it doesn't matter about the win. I don't care. I don't care about the win. Wins don't matter anymore. This is when he was facing a little bit of an uphill battle to win it on the final stage. And then, as you say, the reaction at the end of the power stage was incredible. It clearly meant a huge amount to him. It's difficult at times to work Tanak out, and it became more difficult as the year went on. But, you know, he showed proper joy at winning that event, and you know, you can't take that away from him. He clearly is still a man that's driven by winning.
But I think that's an element of Tanak, isn't it? You know, he's a poker player, and he just became a better poker player this year.
Yeah.
You know, you could read less and less, and all through Japan we were saying, Drivers' Championship, what are you talking about, Drivers' Championship? And yeah, it's a strength of his.
Well, if there was ever a point we may have questioned whether Thierry's season with Thorpe probably would have been on the fast gravel rallies. Not traditionally his happiest of hunting grounds, and indeed as Blackville, we did see a rather frustrated Thierry at the end of Friday with some choice comments about how there's no fun and enjoyment cleaning the road. But if we can take a step away from the championship battle for a second, I want to come to you, Colin, because of all people who got excited, I think, by this young man, it was yourself. Martin says the impact he made for these two events. He did Poland in the non-hybrid Rally 1 team, and he did Latvia with the hybrid, his home event. Yes, he had experience of the rallies, but to come in and be that quick from the off was incredible.
It was incredible, and you know, no disrespect to Sesks, but certainly not a driver I'd heard anyone talking about before this deal was announced to do the two rallies. And then it was like, okay, well, who is this guy? It took me two rallies to actually pronounce his name properly, and it shouldn't be that difficult. But you know, that's how little I've talked about him in the past. And yeah, what he did for me in both those rallies. I heard all of the the mitigating factors, the fact that there were the rallies that he knew, stages he knew, all that nonsense. You have to drive the car quickly and consistently quickly, and this is a problem that a number of drivers have faced in their careers. Takamoto Katsuta, another one that cannot drive a car consistently quickly or struggled to master how to do that. And Sesks came in and made it look easy. And it was something that I felt strongly, and I still feel shouldn't have been possible. That step up is such an enormous step up. Was he helped by the fact the car was maybe a simpler car in Poland without the hybrid? Probably a little bit. A little less to learn for him. But he did the most remarkable job, and he reinvigorated things for me in the championship, in terms of young drivers. There'd been very little talk about opportunities. And then all of a sudden, there's talk about the promoter, there's talk about various other people putting money in M-Sport to bring young drivers in. And we saw Pyrie getting a chance, and there's talk about other drivers for next year. I think Cesc did a lot of good, not just for himself, not just for M-Sport, but for the championship.
It was a storyline, wasn't it?
It was a story. It was a fantastic story, David. There are many, many young drivers who will start their careers with enormous ambitions, to be World Rally Champion, to be a regular in the World Rally Championship. And you know what? That kind of dream was getting pinched, wasn't it, over the years, whereby it was actually looking really difficult. It was all about, and it still is to some degree, timing and circumstance. Cesc showed that maybe, and the initiatives that came from Cesc and the Cesc deal, it just gave a lot of youngsters, I suspect, a lot more encouragement to go out and spend an awful lot of money, because whatever level you're at in rallying, as you know, Luke, costs an awful lot of money. And I think it was a huge story, and I think it was a huge moment, and it was a moment in recent history of rallying that was really, really important, and it was a great story.
I was just going to say, what's the legacy of that? Because
it's
there's no doubt.
It's continuing, David. It's continuing.
And my point is, the legacy potentially is that it shaped the future.
I think so, and I think it gave the promoter, a little bit of reasoning, and it gave them. So what I'm looking for, it gave them justification for putting money in. and M Sport and others to make these things happen. And it showed value. It showed absolute value in backing young
in terms
talent.
of regulations, that's what I'm talking about, is obviously to demonstrate that these cars are spectacular without the hybrid and without the 100 kilos.
What was that as well? That for me was a lesser part of the Cesc story.
But I think, it was an odd one, wasn't it? Because we had a championship fight going on, and it was really exciting coming to the start of those fast gravel rallies.
Ooh, it was building.
But was it becoming stale? I don't think it was, but I think it was just an added spice, wasn't it? This Cesc thing.
Yeah, Cesc was at the front on both events. I know Robin Perry, we haven't actually talked about that in Poland, either remarkable job that he did with those exact amount on the record. To come in without the usual preparation these guys normally do and do what he did.
Johnny Haltonen in the tattoo parlour. Get off the table. We're going to Poland.
And that was almost the bigger story, because we know how much co-drivers prepare for events. They're the ones that will sit for days working out pace notes, working out routes, and he didn't have any of that, did he? Drivers of particularly of Robin Perez's ability, not ideal, but you put him in a car anywhere and say do this rally and he's going to be competitive. And for me, the bigger story was almost the co-driver.
And he wasn't, when you look at I remember talking to him when he was just off the plane and on his way. It was a private jet from Tallinn or somewhere. They'd taken off from Finland, I think, gone to Tallinn to pick up Johnny and then over to Poland or whatever. And Kalle said, look, I'll do what I can, but no chance. I'm not going to win this thing. I can't. You simply can't. And then, oh yeah, I can. I forgot briefly I was Kalle Robin Perez. I can do anything.
Well, Robin Perez, fellow world champion Oyk Tanak, had what we thought was a blistering start in Poland. Certainly, the early split suggests it's going to be one of his rounds in his Sunday push. If you haven't seen the onboard of that, do check it out. It's on the internet. It's amazing. But the big story here was, I guess, Tanak's misfortune, Colin, of finding, well, we mentioned it on the show, didn't we, with the obstacle in the road, should we call it, a deer in the way, and at that speed, there's no chance for the car, is there?
I mean, we were there, weren't we? And there was no chance. There's absolutely no chance. If the season's things are going to go against you, that's the sort of incident. Remember Peter Solberg with the kangaroo David in Australia. It's just, what can you say about that? It was just bad luck. It wasn't going to happen to Terry Neville this year, was it? He wasn't going to have a cow in Sardinia wandering in front of him, or a dog in Croatia, or whatever.
Or if he did, it was going to come in a slow corner.
Yeah, well,
uphill hairpin right,
or he was going to be a jump and it was going to go underneath him. It did kind of typify his season, didn't it? It was a season where he made mistakes. There's no question about that. But he had his fair share of mechanical issues. He then had just the worst of bad luck, and the deer was the worst of bad luck. It really was. When he looked, this was the thing, wasn't it? He looked so confident.
He looked in the ascendancy then, didn't he?
You looked at him at the start of that event and thought, this is the old Tanak. This is the warrior Tanak. This is the Tanak that intimidates. This is the Tanak that dominates. And then the deer dominated.
When did the intimidation falter, Cole? I don't remember the period where he wasn't.
With me, it's got worse. It's got worse,
He can't be quite an intimidating character.
I don't get frightened or intimidated by many people. Tanak just scares the crap out of me. At times, he genuinely does.
But he has that fierce, he's that poker face and that fierce look.
It's a poker face, a fierce look, and it's the dismissiveness.
Yeah.
And he used to do that with his opponents when he won in whatever year it was. He
19.
was like that. He was like that with every other driver.
Yeah, remember the year in Argentina? Was it 18 or 19 when he had the issue and he dropped all the time and he won and it was just, he could do anything.
Yeah,
I would agree that at that point you thought, crikey, this is Tanak time. Yeah. Now Thierry is going to have to dig deep and find something. And for me, that was the point, the very point, and we've talked about this collectively on our WhatsApp group, what have you, that was the point that the season turned for Tanak.
Yeah.
Because he was rising and then bang, that thing had happened and then he was properly back on the back foot and he was chasing again. And yes, he was chasing to begin with, but he was chasing almost on his terms. And now he was chasing almost out of desperation. And that, for me, the accident we saw in Finland, Estonia just before was an odd one. Yeah. And then the big old shunt in Finland, which was a really odd one. As we said, Colin, it was in a sighted corner. He knew what was coming and was just, probably at a gear too quick.
Yeah.
It was odd.
Again, and that's what happens when you start chasing it.
Yeah.
Neville was never chasing it.
No.
He was calculated, wasn't he? And it was every stage, every rally was calculated. Where would you say there was desperation? Maybe
I think
not quite. That might be a little bit strong. But
No, I think there was, but I think also with Tanak, there is an arrogance about a world champion because you've stood on top of the world. And I'm not saying that Tanak's an arrogant character, but it brings that
David, he is.
self-belief.
You have to say it because he is. He is.
But he has absolute self-belief that he knows what it takes to be world champion. He's better than all of these people, apart from Ogier. But all of the people on a full-time programme, he's better than them because he's done it. So that would imagine there would be a bit of oit that's like, right, stand aside, boys, I'm coming through. Oh, where'd that deer come from?
Where did that tree come from? Where did that deer come from? Where did that jump come from?
And
There's a lot of it.
The banner falling in front of his car, didn't he? And it was all just...
Yeah. It was not going to be his year, like you said.
But I think you're right to mention Finland. For me, there was two big turning points of the year. That was the biggest. The one, the rally after that was, I guess, confirmation of it. But Finland was... I actually can't remember where Thierry Neuville was before it all kicked off. But as you mentioned, Tanak went off quite early. At that point, he was actually quite close to his teammate in the championship. Yes, there's something to come, but already we're giving Thierry a bit of an advantage. Sunday and Robin Perez's action is the big thing. Coupled to Evans on the same stage, we suddenly had the situation. Thierry's up to second overall. He's got way more points from Saturday than he thought he'd get. He's driving through Sunday points. Suddenly his lead balloons, and Sebastian Ogier becomes Newcastle's closest challenger on a part-time stage.
It was bizarre. It was absolutely bizarre. I'm working out the mathematics of all of that at the time. It was like, yeah, Neville, this is remarkable, quite remarkable. From a situation where he was going into these three fast gravel rallies, fearing, all of a sudden it's like, job done, boys.
Yeah.
I'm into the tarmac, I'm first on the road, come and catch me.
Happy days.
It was a big turning point, that final two stages in Finland were maybe that was the biggest point in the year for Neville.
That Moxie stage where Elvin went off at the start and Calais at the finish, and we were all teed up to do our sit-down interview with John Coyne, Motorsport Ireland Academy investor and owner of the whole idea. Great, come on, John, we're off. And then, oh no, we're going off. And fortunately, we had two cars, thanks to our friends at Sector Automotive. So two Land Rover Discoveries went to either end of the stage. And it was the most remarkable story. And, we talk about people who are not almost embarrassed to win events. Ogier was a little bit embarrassed to be standing on the top step of the podium in Ivascula on Sunday afternoon, because he knew that was Calais' win. But Ogier's had that happen to him more than enough times. But it was just bizarre, that rock.
But it was again, and was it after Finland, or maybe it was Greece, where Latvala said it's all over for the manufacturers.
Greece,
Finland was they should have bagged a whole load of manufacturer points, and they didn't.
Yeah. And you hear drivers say, I couldn't avoid it. The rock was in the middle. There was no doubt, he came out of that, I can't remember, it was a square right and then into the long left-hander. And Elliot and I went up there, and literally, the rock was enormous.
Yeah.
And there was no, you watched the onboard, you're committed to that line. If you deviate at all, you're straight into the trees anyway.
And here's the thing, because we're talking about that, again, no one is talking about Evans particularly. We know that Evans, and for me, Evans was indicative of the tough season he had, where on occasion he knew he had to pick up a little bit. Yeah. And he was battling for the extra points on the Sunday there. He was picking it up supposedly 2 corners into that penultimate stage, and he's off. We perhaps didn't look at that closely enough, because again, that's potentially the point in Evans' season where we could start saying, okay, well, it's down to 2 now. Evans is more or less out of it.
Yeah. His story was overshadowed by
very much so,
Perrin.
and we didn't look closely enough at what the ramifications were potentially for Evans because of that. And he should not have made that mistake.
No.
And again, it kind of then dictated how he strategized the rest of his season.
Yeah.
It was like, this is what happens. If I try to go beyond my comfort zone, that is what happens.
But I think as well, it wasn't just Elvin. I think it was Rally Finland this year hit Toyota so hard. Yes, they won the rally, and this was the absolute irony and the juxtaposition that Ogier had won. but the team were in tears kind of collectively and metaphorically or whatever. But you look at, Taka went off where he shouldn't have gone off.
Oh.
They all knew that corner and it stepped
They knew
out.
the tree, David.
They knew the tree.
The tree was
They knew the
actually
tree.
one that was well known.
And from a team that literally lives around the corner, and this is their rally, this is where they brought that car up and what have you. It was an unmitigated. I wouldn't use Tom Fowler, I will not use the word disaster.
I never used the word disaster.
Crisis.
Crisis. It was a crisis.
It was. Rally Finland was undoubtedly a crisis, bizarrely, given even that they won the event, compared to what they could have had. And the implications, I think, for manufacturers from Finland were significant.
That was the first time from memory that certainly anybody that high up the leaderboard had forsaken the points they'd reserved on Saturday. They'd lost that, and that's where we saw this massive swing. But as I said, Alistair, it brought Ogier into play, and again, we thought, well, he's repeatedly said it. He wasn't bothered in the Drivers' Championship. We believe him, but I think he's more bothered maybe that he let on once he had the chance. But suddenly the goalposts had changed with Thierry, certainly, to have Ogier your closest rival. We all know the history they've had of battling for championships before, but his reply in Greece was mega.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it was funny in that after Finland, Ogier was almost like, well, fine, I'll join in the fight even though I don't really want to. But did he really not want to, or was this what he was hoping for all along? That's a question mark in itself. But yeah, the response from Neuville was, that's the moment at which it was clear to me that he was going to be champion, effectively. More from a mindset point of view. The whole incident, was it on the Friday or the Saturday? The Friday, where Mr. Ogier made the comments about Neuville often crying about road position. The way he responded to that was as perfect as you could have hoped for. He just basically ignored it, from what I remember. Basically played off the comments as if they weren't. He wouldn't acknowledge them.
He wouldn't respond.
Would not retort, which is exactly what Ogier was hoping for. He was hoping to get him into a nice little psychological battle, get in his head. But that's from 7 years ago. It might have worked 7 years ago, not today.
And it would work today with certain drivers. It didn't work with Neuville because Neuville is way more savvy than that these days. Way more savvy.
Particularly this year.
Yeah, and Ogier knows what he's doing. He puts those comments out there. And he's not expecting an immediate retort from Neuville. He's expecting us, the media, to keep going at Neuville, which is what we did. We want a response. Even when he was provoked at the end of a stage and asked about it, which was bang out of order, I'd have to say. I would never have done that in my days at stage end. I found that very odd. But even in that circumstance, he's just finished the whatever it was, 25-kilometre stage, and the interviewer asks him about those comments, and he's got the wherewithal to go, no, I'm not going anywhere near that. And that for me was a real sign. A guy that's been around for so many years, it's difficult. It's just slow progression in terms of how they develop as people, as a person. And for me, that showed a big step forward. It's like, the Neuville of old might not have been quite as reserved as that, might not have been as canny as that, and is able to deal with that situation as well as he's done. He's got an 8 times world champion goading him. He's got the stick, and he just dealt.
Let's not forget there was another incident of this. I think it was on Saturday morning when Tanak had his punches and asked Ozzy about this. That's a shame. I love it. He was tried, but as you said, Thierry just wasn't for. And then obviously what happened to Ogier. It's worth remembering actually he was leading the rally on Friday, but I think it was a terrible problem, wasn't it? Both of them. And that flipped him backwards. So kind of at that point, he kind of had to try something different. And suddenly that happened, and it didn't go so well for him on the power stage.
But it's absolutely worth remembering as well, Ogier's classic response to the whole thing, his piece of social media at the end. Yeah, that shows the absolute class of Sebastian Ogier, doesn't it? Sitting on his private plane, though.
Did that surprise you, though? Because I thought that, with all the experience that Seb has and all he's been through, surely that was such a transparent tactic that no one would ever have gone for it. That's what shocked me about it.
I think the point was, like Cole said, probably this time last year, Neuville would have bitten. And Ogier is super canny, can use every trick in the book, and we've seen it down the years that his time at Volkswagen taught him so much. The way that he essentially dominated Latvala was, there's a film in there. There's a book in there.
There's
It was
cruelty
remarkable.
in that. If the stories are to be believed in,
I wouldn't say cruelty, Cole, but I would absolutely say absolute ruthless. You know, that's the word.
Yeah.
It's exactly what he was, and it took him to the top of the world.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, you know, that he's going to use every trick in the book. And as we said, there's times that Thierry would have fallen for it, not this time.
I think the other big story we should talk about from Greece as well was, I guess, another incident for Takamoto Katsuta, which at the time never, what none of us expected to do, to travel home and find out he was being dropped for Rally Chile. It's a decision I think we can all understand why it was made, but I don't think, David, any of us really thought it would happen. It just sort of seemed like Taka would always just be in that car.
Yeah, it really sort of polarised opinion, didn't it? That was it the right thing to do? And you look back to when Chris Meek was benched and they brought Andreas Mikkelsen in and all this, and you know, there's been countless times when drivers have been dropped and brought back, and it was a curious one, but clearly an awful lot of thought had gone into it. It was, for sure, it was a shock. Like you say, you kind of saw that Taka was there and he would always be there. But yeah, it worked. It was a very, very difficult one for him to swallow. I remember phoning him after the event, and for the first time ever, he said, you know, David, would you mind? I really, this time, don't want to talk. And we didn't. And then as soon as Chile was over, he was straight on the phone saying, right, now let's talk, ready for CR. And it was great. And the way that he responded to that potentially is going to be the making of, dare we say, it could be a world champion.
Yeah, I think it definitely, we'll get to it soon, but the CR response was mega. But what it did do in this case is give Sami Pairi another chance in the Rally World Cup. We didn't actually mention that from the Finland section before, but this year's WRC 2 champion also got 3 rallies in the top car, which he will drive next season for a whole year. He had Finland, which he won, I think it was his 9th stage start or something. Incredible. It was not bad playing at all. Chile was a bit more of a just learn his way around, and car and CR was a chance on tarmac. And it was nice to see another young driver. I mentioned it with Martin Seska earlier. It was another driver getting a chance. But I think the big story here really was Toyota and the response. You said it earlier with the Latvalas. He essentially, it was waving the white flag. He'd given up in his head after Greece. But to come to Chile and score the maximum number of points, how many is that, David?
The maximum number of points I can't.
This was the perfect way for Toyota to reignite their manufacturer's challenge.
Absolutely, it's what they needed. And I think Latvala was slightly embarrassed by his comments. We did a podcast that never actually aired with George Donaldson after the comments in Greece. And George, it's fair to say, was appalled. He said, you know, Toyota never give up until it's mathematically impossible. And George obviously is you know, he bleeds Toyota, doesn't he? And he was right. George was absolutely right. It was Latvala admitting defeat with, 3 rallies to go? And still plenty of points to be won and lost was a little bit odd. It was
emotionally charged.
It was emotionally charged.
He hadn't realised Doge was keeping his Saturday points.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And again, it was maybe it was maybe to do with the complications of the point system. In fact, it more than likely was. But he was quite embarrassed, I think, about that. And the response was fantastic. And it's exactly what they needed.
In terms of that driver's championship, Roger obviously lost another bit of ground to Thierry Greece, but in Chile they had another mistake on the morning and another one again on Saturday. Very own Colin Elliott behind the camera actually pushed it out of the stage, which is a good moment.
Elliott directed Ogier as to what he should be doing to get out. It was remarkable. And it was remarkable because Ogier was going, yeah, okay, we'll try that.
Well, with everything that happened in Chile with Ogier and, of course, in Greece, Thierry's lead was building and building. We all arrived in Central Europe essentially expecting him to become world champion there. He had a 28-point lead, I think it was. He basically, odds were in his favour to take that challenge. He was leading at the end of Friday, which was more than he expected to do. He admitted that himself. We didn't think he would be that far ahead. Just as we all thought we're going to have to get ready with our champion celebration content and our questions to ask the winner, one particular stage on Saturday, Alistair, where it all went a bit wrong, and suddenly Thierry's challenger would have to wait.
Yeah, I'm still not sure I fully got my head around how all of that happened. You know, one mistake, it happens, you know, the kind of roads there, you just clip a bit of mud that spins you around. It's occupational hazard in that part of the world. But to have two in the same station, the second one being the main problem one, when he got stuck on the gully, you just have this brief moment of, are we not going to get going again? Are we in trouble here? Is this going to turn the whole, like for a split second? It's almost like one of those things in life where you have like three clear options of what can happen. It could either be a complete disaster, it could be a complete nothing, or something in between. And I guess it was kind of half nothing, half in between. I suppose it's funny to think about how it could have been, well, not a 0-pointer, obviously, he could have still got 12 or whatever, but imagine if he just got beached a la Munster at the start of the season. Could have turned everything on its head. But it goes back to what we were saying before about Neuville's season as a whole. It's like luck was just with him at almost every juncture that he needed it. And it was the opposite of Tanak, where luck abandoned him almost every. It's funny how this is a very unscientific way of looking at everything that's happened this year.
I can see you're struggling with it as well.
You know, I'm the one who
You're all
spends
about
all
the
this time
science.
buried
There was
in the
definite
point
degrees of
standings.
luck there. There was definite degrees of luck there because the CER, and there were a number of offs in CER, and the consequences were defined by where you went off. That's maybe a very obvious statement to make, but you were either in the fields, and where it was nice and open, and if you went off, and we saw a lot. Takamoto went miles, didn't he?
Yeah.
And then you see Ogier, who makes the slightest mistake, and because he's in the trees and there's trees on the other side, it's game over for him.
Same with Payari.
Exactly.
Payari's was unlucky, and so was. But by the same extent, Neuville's was very lucky. Two lucky offs in that stage.
Because it's not just a case of wear, it's a case of angle. Because if you look back at the Payari accident and the Neuville accident, they're fundamentally the same off.
Yeah.
The difference is just Payari gets it at almost perfect 45-degree angle, bang, flip it over, whereas Neuville managed to get, I think he managed to rotate it a bit more on the way in.
That's equally, is that luck? You know you're going off, you know where you've got to place the car in that split second, and maybe that's experience. Maybe that's what makes him a world champion.
I would say it is, because I've had an accident in a car where I understeered off and didn't think, let's grab some handbrake and rotate. And if I'd hit the thing side on, it probably would have been fine, but because I hit it at a 45-degree angle,
now you know.
front left wheel came off. So now I know, be like Neuville.
I had one accident in my life, one car crash in my life. I ended up in my roof in the field. That's because I grabbed the handbrake thinking I was Colin McRae.
You were not experienced.
I never told this to HR and to the company car people, but yeah.
But you weren't experienced in a handbrake. The answer's always in the handbrake. You just needed to spend more time practicing.
I didn't know what I was doing, so that was. But I did know what I was doing.
Never changed.
I did know what I was doing when the car was on its roof in a field. I'm there going, oh dear.
That probably
the
wasn't a good
handbrake's on.
idea.
Someone will walk out, crawl back into the car to let the handbrake off, and it was written off. Not because there was damage to it, because it was a slow roll into the farmer's field, and I blamed it on the farmer because there was a lot of mud on the road.
Quick thinking.
Terrible thing, And
the dog ran
the
out.
locals that turned up went, we've been talking to that farmer for the last week about this. I went, yeah, it's not good.
So apologies to the farmer.
So they wrote the car off, apparently, because with those modern cars, and we are talking 20 years ago, if they end up on the roof, all the oil drains out the engine. So it was a technical write-off.
It was
Wasn't
gravity-related write-off. If only there was a rally school you could go to learn how to use a
Nowadays,
handbrake.
it wouldn't happen, Dave.
No.
The Pin Central Europe ended up winning the event, which shortened Thierry's championship league, it's not the best word to use it, reduced his championship league to 25. So heading to Japan, we knew that it had to be a Hyundai driver that was going to win the Drivers' Championship. Realistically, it looked like Thierry. Oit told us he wasn't interested in fighting Thierry. His priority was the Manufacturers' Championship, as we alluded to. Perhaps the way he approached the weekend wasn't quite in line with his comments.
There was an awful lot for Tanak to do. It was not quite impossible, but it was not far short of impossible. But then suddenly, on the Friday, when he hit that problem with the turbo, we all thought, oh my God, it's actually happening. And then as the day progressed and as he continued to drive the car at that reduced speed, he dealt with the problem, and obviously the team changed the turbo or whatever it was at the end of the day, and it was all fine. But no, I think common sense dictated that Thierry would bring this one home.
But you're right, it did get closer than we thought, and we'll get to the manufacturer side in a second, but Tanak was doing everything he had to do. His odds were just win everything, and he was doing that. After Saturday, he was in the lead quite comfortably. In a very controlled manner.
But I think it was Nouvelle's drive on the Saturday that took the kind of bite out of the battle, because it did look, we looked at the amount of time that Neuville had lost on the Friday, and we thought, he can't get into the top 10, he's going to score no Saturday points effectively. And then, the team started talking about a 7th or an 8th, and Neuville put in a drive, he put in a proper drive on the Saturday, and we can't underestimate how impressive that was, because he had to balance so many things, didn't he?
Yeah,
he wanted those positions. He had to balance the need for the manufacturers, and he was quick and he was committed. And we know on those Japanese roads that the more committed you are, the more jeopardy there is, almost, as our friend Oit found out on the Sunday. But I thought it was a hugely impressive Saturday from Neuville.
He stomped it, Cole.
It took the wind out of the sails. It did what?
He stomped it.
Did he?
Yes.
I haven't heard you use that phrase before.
No, not for a while.
He stomped it.
He did. He absolutely killed it, didn't he?
Yeah,
Nobody
did.
came close.
He really did. He
But
really
like
did.
you say, the bizarre thing was that the massive question in his own mind of what do I do? And then the team was saying, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Don't forget, we need manufacturer points. And he was so single-minded.
He was.
You remember talking to him at various times through Saturday, and he was just fixed on what he was doing. Nothing was getting in the way.
Unusually conservative with his words, wasn't he?
Yeah.
On the Saturday, unusually. He was so focused on what you had to do. At the start of the rally, it was in Toyota's hands. They could still, if it all went their way, without relying on anything that Hyundai did, Toyota could still win it.
The start of which day?
The start of Friday.
Friday,
Start the event.
Yeah.
A repeat of what we saw in Chile, and Toyota were manufacturer champions.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case at the end of Saturday night.
It wasn't the case, Scott, because by Friday lunchtime, the deal was done with two punctures, wasn't it, for Ogier and Evans?
Yeah.
They were kind of out of it, totally on the back foot. And then, the madness on Sunday morning. It's just, I mean, obviously, like everybody, we watch, we listen to Rally Live, we listen to scanners and what have you. But it was Bex Williams, just in her own inimitable fashion, shouting, he was off, and you could not believe it. It just made no sense that he'd got the rally in the palm of his hand, everything was looking good, he was doing what he was doing, and it's always when it's early in the day as well, we've just done the pre-stage interviews, we're kind of taking a breath, we're getting a cup of coffee, but it was incredible to actually begin to understand this has happened, and then we're in the car, we have a process that we're all involved with. We find exactly the location, then we try to figure out how do we get there and what can we do, and it was a completely surreal Sunday morning.
Yeah, it took me about 20 seconds to actually register the pictures I'd just seen.
Yeah.
Literally, I was slightly slower than I should have been on my response when it happened, because I'm not believing what my eyes are seeing. But at the same time, I guess I should have seen it coming, because I remember in the lead up to that accident, we're monitoring the splits like a hawk the whole way through, and comparing the splits, and I'm thinking, Tanak is giving this more than I would have thought he would in this situation. He's got those 18 points, sat there, ready to collect. Why is he the fastest Hyundai right now? That doesn't make any sense to me.
And that's
what your other two boys
that when we talked to Cyril at the end of the day, Cyril had said before he went off, he'd already talked to his engineer and said, get a message to him at the end of the stage. Get a message to him to slow down. He's going way quicker than he has to be going. And that is why in my driver ratings, my final ever driver ratings, has to be said, from Rally Japan, I think
He's
I've
just trying to
only
get that on the record. He's not really enjoyed the driver ratings this year. They will continue in some form.
And there are some interesting developments for driver ratings, which I'm quite prepared to look at. But marks out of 10, I'm not. I've only given one or two drivers in the past 0 marks. And I got a wee bit of stick for giving Oit 0. But for me, it was monumental. It was monumental, that mistake. It was such a huge occasion. Hyundai only went to Japan to claim the manufacturer's title. The drivers was theirs. And they had such an easy run of it on the Sunday. They could not have been presented with a better situation. You'll just get your 2 drivers through because there is very little Toyota can do about this. Nothing if we finish. And 6 other Rally 1 cars had gone through that corner without any problems. Yes, there was, because we did go eventually, a small amount of mulch. It wasn't even mud, it was mulch. So it was wet, congealed leaves on the inside of that corner. But Tanak was just plainly too fast when he didn't have to be. And the consequences were enormous, were utterly enormous. You had not just Cyril Abiteboul, not just the head of Hyundai's motorsport division in Japan, you had the chairman of Hyundai ready. And again, we have to talk about it culturally. There's a huge competitiveness between Korea and Japan. And you had the head of 2 of the biggest companies in the world, certainly the 2 biggest motor manufacturers in the world. You know, you had them there at the same event, which is incredible.
At the same table.
Well, eventually at the same table. And Tanak made a catastrophic mistake that is quite unbelievable and as yet unexplained. Unexplained why it happened. And you know, you can't underestimate.
I think in fairness, he did try to explain it.
And he just said it was...
Up. Yeah, exactly. And that's it.
Is that good enough as an explanation?
Well, yeah, you know, sometimes it happens. I think the explanation you're looking for is not in that corner, but in that policy of driving that whole stage. What were you doing going so quick? And the evidence is right there in the splits, like you say. You know, there's no denying that he was up on everybody. Equally, that Sunday morning, sometimes on a WRC round, if you want a fastest time, that first stage on a Sunday morning, it's not a bad one to go for. Yes, the point system's changed this year to offset that a little bit. But yeah, he was going too quick. Pure and simple, Colin.
Yeah, he was going too quick.
Back to our argument. What were we arguing about?
Can't remember.
Can't
remember now.
But everything paled into insignificance. And then
What a bizarre
landing
way.
on top of it.
But, and then what a bizarre way to crown our world champion, because we didn't have to wait to the end of the rally. We're chasing the fill. So we then chase them down to the start of the next stage. And we're already with a celebration to celebrate with them stopping, because they won't really be too bothered now, because clearly, you know, and we're all out with the joyous celebration. And Martin just went incredibly professionally, Colin, we've got a bit of work to do here. And it was like, whoa, boys. And it was in his way. And there are some people that can say things. Some people have to shout. Some people have to be rude and nasty to make their point. Not Martin. It was just his calmness. We've got a bit of work to do here. Okay. And the 3 of us...
He made you look like a naughty schoolboy.
He did. The 3 of us just went, whoa, and we went, okay, and off we went, retreating from the car, waiting for our moment. And again, it just showed how important Vidaga was in that whole winning formula this year. It was so important.
And what he's done in 3 years. You know, we talked a little bit about it in Japan, but congratulations to Thierry. He's been a long time coming. But for Martin as well, it's massive.
Massive.
You know, 4 or 5 years ago, where was he? You know, he wasn't looking to win a world championship. And he's done it, and to come through a difficult patch in the season, you know, in Croatia, he was on the floor. Absolutely on the floor, regardless of what Neville had said. It doesn't matter. You know, that was the least painful part of that process. What really hurt to Martin was that he'd made the mistake in the first place. And, you know, I remember talking to Robert Reid. Reedy made a mistake years and years ago with Richard Burns. They were in Catalonia, and Robert turned 2 pages of the pace note book and read the next note, and they went into the trees at 100 miles an hour. And Reedy said, you know, whatever anybody says at that point, nothing matters. You know, you are just totally down on yourself, and he was. And to come back from that, it's good on him. You know, he's a lovely fella, and he deserves absolutely all the success that's coming his way.
The way I want to wrap up this section really, first of all, just a bit of context. As we know, Toyota ended up winning the Manufacturers' Championship by just 3 points, and effectively that was done on the parent stage. On net points, we had them both.
Wasn't that the closest finish in history?
No. Oh. Guess what you were supposed to, Colin? I'm not making this up, I promise. It's your favourite year in the whole wide world when it comes to rally.
1979. There you go. There you go. It was when there
was 1 point
this,
then, wasn't
20
it?
manufacturers.
What I want to ask you all, I'll go round, I'll start with you, Colin, first of all. Thierry Neuville and Toyota, were they this year's deserving champions?
Thierry Neuville, 100%. And Toyota should have been champions earlier than they were champions. So, yeah, I'd say they were. I'd say they did their best to throw it away, Toyota, this year. But they salvaged it. Right at the very, very, very death, they salvaged it.
Crisis averted.
Crisis averted.
Don't go to one slippy corner. They were one slippy corner away.
One mulchy corner away from a crisis, and and for me, it doesn't mitigate. It doesn't suggest that there are issues that need to be addressed if they are to genuinely make the most of. No, the issue clearly team orders perhaps, but bringing Robin Perra back is the biggest one. But I think 100% Neville deserved it, and Toyota deserved it as well.
Fundamentally the same answer. I was just trying to think, can I even figure out a rationale to controversially say, oh no, Hyundai deserved it? But to be fair, it's one of those seasons where both had moments where you just thought, oh, they've thrown this one away a bit, haven't they? But it just kind of balances out in the end. So objectively, I can't really disagree with Cole on that front.
I'm beginning to argue with myself now, though, in my head. Listen, I'm going to wait to hear what you say, and then I'm going to decide whether I want to argue with myself.
Let's go ideological then in that case and say Thierry was the most consistent driver. You know, we did a quick stats graphic a little while before shooting this that showed that he was fundamentally the most consistent.
It's educational as well as entertaining.
But he wasn't. He didn't top. If you talk about averages and so on, he didn't top anything. In terms of Sunday points, Tanak scored more Sunday points than Neuville did. If you make an average across the season, Ogier versus Neuville, Ogier outscored Neuville both in terms of Saturday points and overall points. So if you go down the old school route of, well, shouldn't the fastest driver be champion?
Didn't win the most stages? Didn't lead the most stages?
But, it
depends.
I guess it's just ideological. What do you think a champion should represent more than anything?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is it the quickest man? Thierry wasn't the quickest guy this year. Didn't win the most rallies. But just to go back to your point, Cole, at the very top of this programme, we said that Hyundai had the strongest driver lineup for this year. Their car had improved almost immeasurably from 2022.
Was it as good as the Toyota?
Probably not, but as a whole complete package at the start of the season, I think we would have said, we'll go with Hyundai.
Yeah, I think we probably would have.
So what failed? How did it go wrong then for Hyundai?
Very good question.
Well, answer it then. That's the point. That's what you're here for. We haven't asked you many questions. Where did it go wrong?
Third driver policy.
Third driver policy.
Yeah.
And I think a little bit of lack of ability to manage Oyt Tanak. I think more than a little bit, a huge amount. They couldn't, and we can say it doesn't matter that they couldn't manage him, that he's unmanageable for 99% of the season. He needed to be managed in that stage, and he needed to be managed on that last day, and someone failed to manage Oyt Tanak, and that's why.
But so you said third drive policy. Who would you have put in the third car? For the full, and presumably full season.
I don't think it's necessarily that you're going to say Mickelson, aren't you?
Of course, and I don't know why they've not got him.
Let him speak.
He's
a question to him, but he hasn't had many questions,
has
he?
Thinking of Spain's turn. I don't think it was necessarily who was in the car. I think it was more how they deployed when said driver was in the car. Quite big gaps between, particularly I think Mickelson's season. Using Mickelson on tarmac was
bizarre. It was utterly bizarre.
Where was Sordo in that equation? He should have been on all the asphalt rounds.
That for me was where it was. You saw Laffy struggled a lot without regular seat time and stuff. I looked at that drive lineup at the start of the year. They were all rally winners. One of them was already a world champion. It was incredible. For some reason, that third car's return just didn't do its thing. I think a lot of it is potentially because of just, I guess, how their seasons were structured. But with Formula going here for a full season, they're doing a different tactic next year. So we'll see how that works.
I think you've nailed it.
Thank you.
Would you really put Mickelson in for the whole season?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%.
But the trouble is, Lappy didn't want it, did he?
Lappy didn't want it. Sordo, as we know, is a confidence driver, and there's too many situations where Sordo doesn't feel it.
But he's always going to be fourth or fifth. Sordo.
He's always been fourth or fifth, no matter what surface you put him on.
But is that not enough?
I think it probably is, and I think it is. But could you have relied on him to be fourth or fifth? I'd have gone Mickelson, and I think Mickelson knows his place, knows what he's got to do. This is my big concern next year for Mo. Is he a driver that knows his place? What are they doing? Are they saying we don't care about the manufacturers next year? We're going to win the drivers?
You could have said Oliver Solberg, but then would Oliver Solberg have come in and done the job of a third driver?
So Solberg again, though, it's a real difficult situation for manufacturers. Do you give a young driver a chance, or do you look at the manufacturers and say we need a safe pair of hands? We need someone who will do exactly what we tell them to do.
Yeah.
And a young driver that wants
He's
to
looking
prove
for career
himself.
progression.
In the Formula, this is the whole Formula thing.
Yeah.
This for me is the thing with Sorrow. You don't even need to tell him what to do. He
He
just
just
does
knew.
it.
Yeah.
Just does it.
He knows instinctively exactly what he has to do, and he prides himself on the fact that I'm sure he's mentioned it to you in maybe not Stage Ends media zones. I don't do silly crashes, and he doesn't. It just I remember having to look back. The last time I could find a self-enforced error was like Safari 21 or something like that. It's just so rare. Like I remember describing him as the world's best insurance policy. I reckon that's still a valid way to describe Danny Sordo. Because there were times that went, okay, he didn't contribute to the points total manufacturer-wise for Hyundai, but the only reason it happened is because he was directly behind one of his teammates who took the points instead. And if one of those cars had disappeared, there's no one in between. Danny Sordo takes one position, and he's taken the points that his teammate would have had anyway. So he's done his job.
For me, it would have been a toss-up between Sordo and Mickelson. But I always, as an all-round driver, I always rated Mickelson as a slightly better all-round driver than Sordo.
But do you not
Only
think
because
Mickelson would have seen this year then as another opportunity to reignite his career?
No, I don't think so. I think he's way beyond that in his career.
Really?
I genuinely think. I think he's bright enough to understand that it's not. Mickelson knows that his career is done.
Yeah, but what if Mickelson then had done what Lappy did in Sweden and won Sweden? Then suddenly he's potentially leading the championship if he'd had a half decent Monty.
I don't know.
Then suddenly,
I don't know. I think Mickelson he's self-aware enough, David, to know that he doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have the speed of a Neuville. He doesn't have the speed of a Tanak. He's certainly not got the speed of an Ogier.
Yeah.
So
No,
you're
fair enough.
lucking into a win in Sweden. Might have given him points, might have given him championship position, but it wouldn't have given him hope.
he's certainly more malleable, isn't he, for a team, for
Well, and that's
Evitable
my point.
to
But
work with.
that's the dilemma. And I would like, and I've said this for many years, I would like, a situation where the FIA legislate for third drivers.
Yeah.
And that the third driver has a certain maybe age limit, or maybe a certain experience level, that means that they are forced to take young drivers. Because I think the biggest thing that stops teams from taking young drivers is this constant dilemma they have in, we need points, we need manufacturer points, we need that safety net, and will that young driver give us that?
Now it's time for us to be a bit more reflective about the year as a whole outside of the World Rally Championship, because as we know, there's a far bigger world of rallying out with the WRC and of course at Dirtfish as well. David, as our head of media, I think you're the right man to come to first. If we think about this year, things you haven't done as part of WRC, what stands out in your mind? What do you think has been a really memorable moment for 2024?
Crikey, how long have we got? There's been so many. At the start of the year, going to Snowdrift. A snowless Snowdrift was great. It's a rally I've always wanted to go to. And our esteemed colleague, Brenton Kelly, BK, assures us Michigan is the finest part of the world. It was great. That was an adventure. But then, I guess, now an annual highlight for us is our Women in Motorsport Summit. And this year, I sadly didn't attend, but watching from afar, watching the live stream, it was incredible. And all credit to Josie Rimmer and the way that she continually grows and grows and grows this. Josie, of course, is our Women in Motorsport coordinator. It was sensational. Michelle Mouton has been part of the process from the moment we started this. Josie wanted, Michelle involved, and she called Michelle and asked, "Would you be guest editor? Would you?" She couldn't attend in the first year. I can't remember why, but she guest edited Dirtfish throughout the month of March. The next year she came to the summit. Last year she came out with Pernilla Solberg, with Bex Williams, with all of these, incredible, powerful women, and it was fantastic to sit and watch and just to see how that whole process is growing. It's becoming a real force. And then when it's finished, we're fortunate to go around the world with this sport and to see the way that the message is out there. Everybody coming to us and saying what Josie's doing with the summit is incredible. It's empowering women and it's educating women around the world. It's tremendous. I know watching Josie planning for 2025 summit, it's going to get even bigger. It's moving from Dirtfish, which is a difficult move. It's going to the LeMay Museum, America's Car Museum just south of Seattle in Tacoma. It's a big deal because, it's Josie's thing, it's Dirtfish's thing, and we want to keep our arms around and keep it to ourselves, but it's outgrown it. It's so big now. So for me, it was, as I say, I wasn't there, but just to see how big a deal that is now, it's sensational.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, in fairness, because I was at, not this year's one, I was there last year with you, actually, and I remember the feeling of just, I don't know how to describe it, actually, but just it was just like a really feel-good day. It was empowering, I think is the best word, wasn't it? It definitely makes, and you can see it making a difference, people just being there and seeing their heroes and actually learning that all the possibilities they have in front of them. It was great. Alistair, I'll come to you now for any more different highlights from your year.
Sure. For my year, recency bias always kicks in with these things. I was lucky enough to be at the home of Cesare, Alex, and Maria Paola Fiorio, the great Lancia dynasty, and the way that they're trying to kind of not necessarily change or completely reinvent the way we organize and structure rallies, but kind of trying to introduce the idea that maybe we need to look at other ways of bringing back some of the magic we used to have. We can't go back to the days of 60 stage itineraries. That's just not practical to organize in this day and age. But are there ways that we can change the format of things so that everyone's a bit more relaxed? These kind of experiments I think are really helpful. And of course, I was with you on Rally of Nations as well, which was quite a fun. Yeah, what fun indeed.
Good.
Remind us about his trainers again. Rallying in Mexico is a lot of fun, isn't it? It just is.
It is, but it's what Alistair said. It's you're looking at ways of progressing rallying, of moving it forward, of looking at the issues that surround rallying. And for me, my highlight of the year was actually two events. One was the Rally of the Heartland in South Australia. The other was the Daybreaker Rally in New Zealand. Both for similar reasons. They have event directors. Now in South Australia, Rally of the Heartland, Ivor Stanlis, who runs that event, 83 years old, and he's the most progressive, dynamic rally manager, CEO, whatever you want to call him, that I've come across. He understands, he gets it. He understands that rallying is about customers. They're your customers. Your entrants are your customers, You look at all the ways you can to give them value, to keep them in your rally. You're not looking to exclude drivers for there's some petty reasons that we see. You're looking at the rules. Yeah, making it competitive, keeping the competitive element, keeping the competitive edge, but having fun. And it was the same, perhaps even more so, at the Daybreaker Rally. The two guys, T-Mac and Paul, who run that event, two incredible individuals who, put in an enormous amount of work to make the rally as good as and as great as it is. But more than that, looking at the opportunities. Rallying is a sport, sadly, that presents lots of opportunities for people not to want our sport. There's an awful lot out there who look at the fact that we're running through some incredibly beautiful parts of the world. We can be quite noisy at times. We have drivers on road sections who can be quite disrespectful at times. There are plenty of opportunities for locals to not want the event. What Paul and T-Mac did was they went and gave the locals opportunities, not just opportunities, but reasons to embrace the event.
You're absolutely right. We need to understand the entertainment aspect of what we're doing. And if you look for entertainment in the middle of the year, there's only one place to go, and that is Goodwood Festival of Speed. And again, Dirtfish is always there, always at the heart of the Goodwood Forest Rally stage. And it's thanks to Steve Remmer taking some of the incredible cars, and we'll get to where we are and what these cars are about in a minute, but just Steve taking the cars there year after year, it's incredible, and it brings so much pleasure to so many people. And it genuinely is a sort of pinch yourself moment when you're standing outside that house and you've got a Formula One car going up there behind you. And obviously at the festival this year, our owner Steve Rimmel was privileged to get in the car with Elvin Evans and Jari-Matti Latvala, and what an opportunity. He rode in the Rally 1 car and the Rally 2 car. And it was great. And where else in the world can you do that? You'd think nowhere. And you'd be wrong. Actually, the Rally 1 and Rally 2 bit, you would be about right. But seamless segue into Velocity, which is another great event. Yeah. It is seen as a sort of North American version of Goodwood Festival of Speed. Again, Dirtfish was there, and it was great. Marco Martin, absolute star, driving Steve's Audi Quattro, and Delta S4 was there. James Rimmer drove that. It's great, and it's amazing to have the opportunity to put history, to bring history back to life.
And it's also an opportunity to bring other aspects of motorsport and show them the wonderful world of rally. Remember, Romain Grosjean stepped into the 205 at Velocity. And
Kareem Chanduk at Goodwood at the Festival of Speed, taking Holly McRae up the hill. Exactly. It was fantastic for Grosjean to experience car.
For me, one of the highlights of the year has to be Donna Kelly's, I was going to say reunion, but it's not quite, because it's never been done before. It was a totally unique event. It was like a celebration that year of, I guess, what many of us would look at as the glory years of the British Rally Championship. Sort of mid to late 1990s, early 2000s, the Formula 2 kit car days, all of the stars, bar a couple who sadly couldn't make it for various reasons, but to have so many of these legends there up against all the cars that they drove. Donna's collection at the Stables Motorsport Museum in Donegal is incredible. Everything you've heard about it is true. That's what I would say.
That's brought me back, if I could just be allowed one final memory from the year, and it had to be Killarney. It was only last weekend, so I don't know how I'd forgotten about it already, which I hadn't really. Donna Kelly obviously won the event, won the historic. It was great to see Donna Kelly winning in a BMW M3. For me, even better to see Rory Kennedy alongside him. Rory Kennedy is one of the nicest guys in the world. He's just a lovely, genuine, absolute rally man to his core. And he won, Killarney won the Lakes in 1990 with Bertie Fisher in an M3. And genuinely, you know, there was a tear in the eye when you saw him coming, I was going to say over the ramp, but it's not a ramp because they don't have time to build a ramp because the roads aren't closed for long enough. To come and see him coming through the arch was incredible. And obviously the other big aspect of Killarney this time was Calais Rovanpera and Jonny Heltonen coming over to drive a Toyota Starlet. Elliot and I were just so privileged to be there and to be taken into the team and into their company, and it was an absolute honour to be there and to watch it and to see the enthusiasm, the emotion, and just to enjoy the cake in Avoca. It was all fantastic.
Yeah, I was quite jealous of you that weekend, I have to be honest. But
it was great.
It did look good.
It was astonishing.
Yeah.
It was one of the weekends.
It's wonderful to see, and I guess that's the point of Callie's year this year, wasn't it? Was to try things that he didn't have the time to do, but just how much he enjoyed it was what really stuck out for me. Watching all the videos you managed to capture and stuff was just the smile on the pair of them's faces. It never went, did it?
And that was the point. You know, we waited at the end of Mole's Gap, the first stage, and he'd had this electrical problem halfway. Well, actually in the gap. And there was about 3k to the finish, a mile and a bit to the finish, and we waited, and then he fired the card up again. They got through, and we opened the door at the end of the stage. And I thought, you know, you think, our driver's lost 4.5 minutes, he'd be raging, and I opened the door, and he just couldn't stop grinning. He was smiling so widely, it was incredible. And I was like, what about it? And he was like, coming up the hill. It was just incredible. And from that moment throughout the day, he just loved it. The pair of them loved it, and sadly, you know, there was half an hour given to the autograph session, and Callie got to the end of the half an hour, and Paul Nagel came in and said, look, you've really got to go, got to get you to the ceremonial, to the start. And Callie was like, no, let's do another 15 minutes. And you know, he was just so giving of his time. It was incredible, the reception he got there, and the reception at that ceremonial start, and actually the finish when he did the burnout. It was nuts.
I have to say what impressed me most, you're right, you know, Callie's demeanour all weekend was fantastic, and he is so good for this sport, he really is. But what astonished me was watching some of the fan footage. Yeah. And I'm thinking, he's gone from, the fastest, but the safest rally car ever built. You know, and you can commit in those Rally 1 cars. Yeah. In the knowledge that, you know, if you do make a little mistake, chances are you're going to be okay. And he's in this tiny little pocket rocket, and I'm looking at it jumping in these stages in the wet, and it's going from one side of the road to the other, and I'm thinking, poor old Johnny must be absolutely himself in there. And you could see how much fun Callie's. I'm thinking, there's nothing to that car, but he was just so committed and so fast, and it was like, that's proper rally. It was proper
If you
rally.
haven't seen the overtake where he passes the car in his stage, and just the left, it was
great.
insane.
Great to see.
Just before we go, you may have been wondering what this massive Aladdin's cave of dreamy rally cars is all about. Where are we? Who do they belong to? Well, I've got just the man to ask the questions. Ian Gwynn of BGM Sport. How are you, mate?
How are you, Luke?
Not too bad, yourself?
Good, yeah, very well, thank you.
Tell us, I guess it's the obvious question, but where are we?
Well, we're at BGM Sport Base in Brackley, and as you can see, I mean, you know, we have an array of different cars that we look after for different customers, and you see the ones in the workshop that we're currently restoring for different customers at the minute. And where we're sitting up here is our sort of, we call it a store, but it's more of a rotation because we literally just got so much work going on. We have to rotate the cars around from top to bottom.
I'm sorry, a store? A store?
Well,
wow, this is some proper store, isn't it? I mean,
it's a nice car store, isn't it?
Jeez.
Yeah.
Just tell us, I was saying this RS200, this was,
Yep.
I think, the first car that I went with you
Correct.
in, wasn't it? We
Yep.
did a bit way back
We did
when.
way back. We did a feature on the car when Steve first bought the car,
Yeah.
and yeah, we went and did some big skids in that.
We walked in today, boys, didn't we? And you walked past an RS200. That's not just an RS200, is it? Tell us a bit about that.
Which one?
The white one down there.
Well, that's an RS200 Evo road car. That came to us in, I think, April time this year, and we've literally just done a full nut and bolt restoration on the car. And I mean, we're lucky. We do a lot of Group B cars. We've done a lot of RS200s, and it's probably off the back of us, you know, lucky that we have, you know, the original Stig car that Steve bought for us to look after. So
This is the great thing about coming here, the first time we came
Yeah.
here. It is an education in rallying history. It's
I
the
mean,
best history lesson you ever
we
get.
have an amazing amount of history in the building. Yeah.
And not just the rally cars. We were fortunate. Elliot and I were here last week with you to do a piece on the Mark 1
Yep.
RS1600.
Yeah,
that is-
the one behind us. Yeah.
That one and
Yep.
the road car.
And the road car downstairs,
52
yeah.
years old. And you were saying it's actually better after the restoration than when it first came off the production line.
I mean, they're only meant to last about 10 years at the most, you know. So, yeah, I mean, the detail that goes into a road car in particular is they've just got to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as much as you do a lot of Group B work, one of the absolute favourites for me is Jim Harrison's ex Bruno Thierry Impreza.
Lovely,
down
isn't
there. We're so used to seeing Imprezas in blue.
Yeah.
And that was the Winfield car from EPA. I mean,
Correct.
how long did that?
2 years.
And tell us a little bit about the process.
Well, it arrived to us. Jim had bought the car and it looked quite a nice car. In fact, it looked a very nice car.
And it was in blue, wasn't it?
It was in blue, and never was a blue car. And Jim wanted it because it was an original Winfield car built by ProDrive for the 97 EPA rally. And he said, I want it red. And I said, well, the only way we can do it red is to completely bare metal it, which opened up some, let's say, some horror stories. Which, I mean, it's a rally car at the end of the day. They got rallied, they got crashed, they got repaired, and that's what it was like.
And one of the highlights of the year, every year, is,
Yep.
of course, when you get the chance to take these cars to the Festival of Speed. Of course,
Yep.
You prepared the cars that went to Velocity Invitational this year as well, but great for you to go and see Steve Rimmer, our owner. He's just a passionate guy about
Amazingly
everything,
passionate, isn't he, about rallying and rally cars, and yeah, I mean, just such a nice person, and he just loves helping people, you know, with their dreams, I suppose, and we're lucky to be a part of that.
Yeah.
That's a great event, Goodwood.
It
Yeah,
never
really
gets
good.
old, does it?
No, never.
It really doesn't. It
No.
is just the most sensational place, and it's just a great place, and it's always an absolute treat to come in. And it is remarkable, and we talked about this a little bit last week, that it's 15 years that you've been here preparing these cars, doing this job.
Correct,
And
Well, I've been doing the job all my life, but the BGM Sport was created here 15 years ago. Yeah,
and look at what you've achieved. I mean,
we've had an amazing amount of cars through here.
proper storeroom as well.
Yes, proper. Yeah, maybe we'll call it a toy room.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a more apt description.
On behalf of all of us here, thank you very much for having us here. We can't really think of anywhere better to have done what we've done today than around all this, so thank you very much.
No, absolute pleasure.
Well, there we are. Thank you very much for sticking with us throughout those various sections of debate, chatter and discussion. I think plenty to take away from that. So thank you very much for watching this, and indeed throughout the entire year. We'll see you in 2025.